Hello again. We're going to begin in just a minute, but before we begin, I'd like to remind everyone in the room and online that it's not too late to join the lightning talks. And you can find that and sign up for that on the Wagtail Slack site. And just in about a minute, I'm going to introduce our next speaker. Our next speakers are going to be talking about 3D files with Wagtail. Dawn Wages is the Python community advocate for Microsoft. She's also a founder of Command Lines Ltd. Limited. And Mira Gibson is the founder of Ard Tech. And again, they're going to be talking about 3D files with Wagtail. Welcome.
Thrilled to be here. We were just chatting with Tim earlier. My name's Dawn. I am the Dawn on that screen. And I gave my first talk ever on this campus over in the business school. And now I'm giving my first talk ever with my wife. I'm so excited. We were recently married. We are just under a year, and it's been really exciting. Glad. We didn't have a wedding, so this is our wedding. Thank you, Wagtail, for covering it. So what we're going to be talking about today are 3D file types. This is something that I've not actually even had an interest in getting into, but really got nerd sniped by the awesome way that Django handles file types and image files in Django. So there's kind of like a chunk where we start out with 3D images and get everyone kind of acclimated. Then we'll go into the Django and Wagtail of it all. I'll show you a proof of concept that we got moving and working. So that was fun. And then I'm going to ask you to rip apart my code at the sprints. And maybe we can make something really cool because I think this idea has legs.
Oh, yeah. Hi, I'm the Mira in this. Nice to be here with you all. This is going to be my first Wagtail talk and second talk overall, so I'm happy to be here with you guys and happy to be here with my mom. Oh, that does something. She put this together.
That surprised you with some things. Just hit next. It'll go.
Okay. So, well, we're going to talk about what 3D images are, the file types, the immersive web, and we're going to get into WebXR versus WebGL, as well as 3JS and A-Frame. And then Dawn is going to talk about the Wagtail and Django-N, how it handles files, and show you guys a proof of concept, which I think is really cool. So, Donna Mira. I'm an XR dev and designer. I work with Unity and C# and 3JS, as well as Unreal Engine and things like that. Founder of Ard Tech, which is ARDD. In the Philly area, when you say okay, sometimes like as in all right, sometimes people just say ARD, and that's where the name comes from.
And did you say the acronym of it?
Oh, the acronym is Augmented Reality Design and Development.
Very clever. I'm just proud of you for that one. That's cool. My name's Dawn. We talked about what I do before already. I do web and data, and that's my happy place. And I've been doing Python, Wagtail, and Django since about 2016. I have to do the obligatory shout out to Django Girls, as I always do. They gotta show up everywhere and you don't always know it, but Django Girls is what started my career in Django in 2016 when DjangoCon US was in Philadelphia. So conferences matter, showing up matters, these events matter, and I really appreciate you all being part of my community. I'm the co-founder of Command Lines, and a few people here may know some of my co-founders, Marietta and Chook, who are also in the Python community as well.
So XR, what is it? It is an umbrella term that covers a few different types of experience. So there's AR, VR, MR, and actually it covers those three: AR, VR, and MR, which are which are augmented reality, virtual reality, and mixed reality. So augmented reality is anything that's kind of just an overlay on the natural world. You can interact with it, but it is not as immersive. Virtual reality is a completely immersive computer-generated world in which you can interact with digital items, and mixed reality is a combination of the two. It can be an overlay of your entire physical world, and you can interact with items both in the digital space as well as the physical space in new ways. So, WebXR and WebGL, what are they? What are the differences, and how does it relate to XR? So, I'm actually going to start with, I know WebXR is up at the top. I'm going to start with WebGL. WebGL is a graphics library API that helps you put pixels on the screen. It can be used for 2D, but is used a lot for 3D images and rendering. WebXR is an API that allows you access to devices, access to specific features on devices in which you would use within extended reality. So, like when you have, like, let's say Pokemon Go, the WebXR API allows you to use the camera to basically throw Pokeballs and make sure that everything kind of lines up in the digital world and the physical world together. And I know it says to produce immersive web experiences. WebXR is the best choice. However, WebGL and WebXR work in conjunction with each other to create a truly immersive web and a truly immersive experience. You definitely need both. Although WebGL is a lot to code by itself, so I tend to use things like 3GS or Babylon or Pixie.js. These are all 3D frameworks in JavaScript that allow you to create 3D images as well as rendering. But there are other things such as Unity and Unreal Engine that allow you to do these things without a need for much code. And the different file types that we actually use within the 3D and XR space are FBX, STL, which is more used for things like what is it? Like digital printing, 3D printing, GLTF and GLB files, which are very similar to each other, except one holds binary information that includes the animation and the material and textures of the 3D image that you're rendering, and object files, which just contain the object itself. So it can be a 3D object, but there is no color, no animation, nothing. It's just how it looks. And it's probably one of the easiest ways to just get a 3D file to render. Currently, GLTF and GLB are the standards because they're a lot smaller and easy to put on the web. So I know we talked a lot about JavaScript frameworks, but you guys all work in Python. So one of the easiest ways to use that the same functionality that you get with 3JS, which automatically uses the WebGL API, is to use A-Frame, which is a HTML-based framework that is an abstraction of 3JS that allows you to use certain features and components, as well as it allows you to access the WebXR API at the same time so that you can use both 3D images and access those functionality without having to use two separate technologies. And A-Frame is actually pretty easy to use and get started to right from the box. You can use a CDN link and start going right away, adding in a scene to any vanilla website with just straight HTML and CSS, no JavaScript needed. So why 3D assets? Why are we talking to you about XR and that? Interactivity. It creates a more interactive web, allows you to see and think about things in a different way. Accessibility. Now with the web being stronger, it's more easily accessible to get 3D images on the web and to view them. It's flexible. GLTF and GLB files are, like I said, the easiest way to get 3D on the web, and it's really useful for doing just about anything. You can also make them into 2D images, render them as 2D images. And then Wonder and Whimsy, which leads into the next point, which is engagement. And it gives you a sense of wonder, and it makes things a lot more easier to understand if you don't understand it. How, let's say, kids in school studying science, you see a mitochondria cell and you're more engaged in it, and it makes you actually more curious about the world around you. And I think that's really important as we grow and get into a very digitally based society. And then off to my wife.
I'd also like to underscore the intentional misspelling in whimsy, which is very whimsical of us. Okay, so there's a quote there. Okay. So now we're going to get into how Django and Wagtail handle some of these image files. You're going to see code on the next several screens. The intention of this is to really give a big hand clap to the framework that many of us have chosen with our feet and our time here. Django is so opinionated in what I feel like is one of the right ways. And so I'm going to be going into a lot of the inheritance that happens with image and file fields, and like giving a kind of a praise clap to all of the work that I don't have to do by trying to initiate this project instead of rolling my own. So we start out with the image file field. We are inheriting, this is a Wagtail image field. We are inheriting from the models.image field from Django. This allows us to have access to Willow, which is the default image library that is maintained by Torchbox and Friends, and it combines Pillow, Wand, and OpenCV. I don't have access, or the approaching this, I didn't have understanding of what Wand and OpenCV does. That's the point of having some of these abstractions, because it makes it easier to use. But Pillow is a fork of the PIL library. That one kind of rang a little bit of a bell to me. So this is giving a framework, a level at which I'm coming into these problems too. So it kind of is intermediate problems, but this could be kind of like a nerd snipe from all levels, because it'll be really fun to kind of approach from all skill sets. So the PIL fork from the Python imaging library. And then Wand is an API bindings for Python, and OpenCV is a computer vision library. So then from that, we're digging into what is that Django image field. We're starting out with some code where we're defining the attribute class, a descriptor class, and then the description with that lazy underscore. You may recognize that for translations. And then we're initializing this class. You'll see the self width field and self height field. One of the questions that I'd like to solve over or have answered over sprints is, why is the width in the image, width and the height so tedious in these problems, right? But you're adding additional attributes, characteristics around the file, and then there's going to be lots of different levels at which you're updating and rendering and then sharing this file, that it ends up being a headache. And a lot of these problems have been additionally solved in ways that I would have assumed would not have been so difficult. So here we also have some checks. We are also using the parent class check, that is at super.check with the keyword arguments as well from the file field. And then we're also checking if that image library is installed, which is fun because we get really great error handling in Django. So it'll respond with saying, hey, you don't have, for example, you don't have Pillow installed. Reminder, we are looking at the Django code, not the Wagtail code. In the Wagtail code, it will say Willow, and it'll show that there's like an import error for us. We also have the deconstruct method now in the image field. That'll help us with the width field and the height field and assign it with our arguments. And then we're also accessing the file field from that parent class as well. We have the contribute to class, and we're getting more and more in the weeds. You see the number of question marks that I had on the why, so confused. Why are some of these needing to be elevated and having these constructor classes going down? And I'm going to be, I think a really cool iteration too of this is to describe some of the decisions that I made when extending into the GLTF files, and then having some comparisons on how I wish it would have rather been done, or maybe adding some comments in Django code that makes it easier. But Django is really good at being documented. So the contribute class helped with addressing a bug that has been had, and then we also get the bug number. So I can just go and look it up. And for interest of time, I did not include it as well. But we also have, so the TLDR on this one is that when you have the model init, it will only run on post initialization dimensions to update non-abstract models. So that's a hairy thing I'm so glad I didn't have to deal with, thank God. Really is the summary of this slide. We also have a similar experience trying to dig deeper into why so confused on the update dimension field. But there's documentation in the source code that highlights that as well. Thank you, Django. So in this one, the TLDR it's hooked up to the model's post-init signal, and it will update dimensions after instantiating the model instance. And again, something that seems so simple as the height and the width of an image file really gets tedious when you're starting to work in complex systems, and I don't have to handle that. And I'm so glad that I picked Wagtail and Django. We have some more documentation that we'll talk more about with the update dimensions fields. I won't go into this too much. I don't want to zoom through it, but for accessibility reasons, just review it at your leisure. But it's really kind of more of like, yay, Django. Both the dimensions fields have values that are most likely loading from data from the database, and so these will solve some of these things with the image descriptor dot set. Also, there are comments about when you're going to have none for the image, and otherwise it should be an image field file. And then we also now, near like the end of the class, we're getting to actually assigning the file. And then you're actually assigning the width now, and you're actually assigning the height. And if not, they're going to clear those values. We also have the form field method that's going to be accessed on this same class. And there is a whole chain of information that you need for Django that handles forms and handles it appropriately. It'll have some cleaning and some validators for your extension types, and it'll pull from the PIL library to get some of those as well. And then go to another step deeper, because it's just inheritance is really great. But here are a lot of all of the classes that are accessed in the file field, the additional what was inherited from the image field. And again, it is highlighting and underscoring the point that I didn't have to do all of these things myself. And as I am deviating from norm, I go through and to find the definition in my VS Code instance, and to figure out what I am missing when I am overriding some of these methods. And this is more of the file field of what the file field does. So here, the call out is really that the checks method and the storage checks and the deconstruct and the pre-save are really cool. I wouldn't have known to do some of these things. For example, we have self.storage equals storage or default storage. Then we're making it if it is callable, right? So we're going to have different types that are sometimes callable, sometimes not callable. You are assigning it appropriately and then doing a kind of what feels maybe redundant, but probably solve some additional bugs that would have otherwise been raised, where you're assigning self.storage equals self.storage with that deconstructor, with that deconstruct. And then we also have checks. So more checks where there is a check the primary key and check where it's uploaded to. In those deconstruct and the pre-saves, I mentioned I want to call attention to that storage equals get attribute self, storage callable, self-storage. You're defining what that storage variable means, and then you're adding it to your keyword arguments, and you're adding it to that storage object. So just different paradigms that patterns that they're using in order to access your image in your storage, that just, it's an opinion that Django has, and I don't have to have one because it does. Again, it's also with this super pre-save, we have some storage references there as well. So now we're in the instance where I'm trying to support these 3D files. I've gone through all of this code. I'm feeling jazzed. I'm really excited because the code is well documented. You're seeing this like daisy chain of inheritance that's very Pythonic. And when you're looking at good Python code, it feels good. So I'm doing some of these things where I'm abstracting, and the 3 steps that I really went to be able to support these 3D files starts with extending the functionality from Django and Wagtail, and then incorporating the attribute changes from the XR file fields. If I could harken back to the slide that my wife did, she's not just my wife, Mira Gibson, person in her own right. Apologies. I want to highlight on the right side of the screen, we have the scene, the camera, the mesh, the group, several levels of geometry, material, and texture. In future case, I want all of that to be similar to the functionality that my width and my height did. So we're going to be comparing some of those patterns in the class for our image file. Go back to where we are. Okay, and then next, we already had a package that does the work for us. You can go to that repo that I have in the top right-hand corner. It's tough code, friend. It's not bad, but it's tough code. It's really just a proof of concept. So we'll be here at the sprints to try to vet some of this a little bit more and see where this can go. But once you have it into the binary file type, it's saved to the database. No problem. It just worked, and that was really exciting. And then last, you're going to want to render it to the front end with A-frame.
So A-frame is, like I said before, is a framework that is HTML based. You use tags in the same way. It's an abstraction of through.js, which gives you all the same functionality. And like Dawn said, it is a rough proof of concept because it is this was a task we got together on a few occasions and paired program.
But the A-frame part seemed very very straightforward once we figured out the version number and the documentation. And so I feel like that part is not going to be changed very much. What's really going to be interesting is because Django leverages just very understandable HTML templates for the front end, and I love to do that unless I have to. I'm an HTMX girly when I need to be. I think that'll be really interesting to leverage that, and it'll programmatically just be able to make some decisions for us. No, I think that's a good slide because I was leaning into, yeah, totally. So our end goals on this would be to extend the functionality into a package. But what is that package going to look like? We could either go the route of extending the PyGLTF library, make it more like Pillow and Willow, maybe upstream it into Willow. I have not talked to the Willow team before getting on here and saying that, so that was a little risky move. But I'll chat with them to see if that seems like a good option. But one of the cool things that Willow and Pillow does is it creates options for you to instantiate the object and then access it and then see your file type and then play around with it. You can do that in the console. But what is PyGLTF is really like a lot of methods to change from one file format to another. And so it would be great to have a more robust object-oriented type paradigm to like play around with it that already exists. And if it could be supported by the main community, if that's something that seems interesting, then we can upstream it in a friendly way. Or we could go a different route and do something similar to like a Puppet, the bird, and it is well, named after the bird, is the library that allows you on a Wagtail site to create a blog engine. And I really like that when I'm using it for my personal blog. But one of the cool things is it just kind of handles the end-to-end process for you. If you run manage.py, it's going to create new databases for you. It's going to have default references to templates you should be using, things like that. So for example, if we go with what I think is the most viable and maybe commercially attractive use case for these things, which would be like maybe an e-commerce site, you could have a list and a detail page and certain things like that that handle those normal patterns. Very similar to Wagtail's content management system, we can package that up all into like a Puppet-like library instead. This could also end up being two different libraries if it's, we'd have to like multiply the amount of time that we have to be able to maintain it. But this is a really fun one that got us both really excited about the end use cases. And if you're seeing on more and more in e-commerce sites, people are browsing through with 3D images. And so hypothetically, if you just get a list page where your image just renders, you just have to upload it with your image just renders, and you have controls on your dash, and then you also have controls in your Wagtail that allow you to edit or do it on the fly. I was talking to a friend just now about Blender's Python API. So the implications are really, really cool. And so that's a lot on the goal. The goals are big. But the three things that categories on how we can improve, I think, are leveraging the extra attribution. So that slide that I have where it has the scene and the textures and the models and things like that, I think are really great to incorporate. We also have leveraging Wagtail strengths. So those would be like having it all accessible through the admin and maybe making some cool conversations with cool calls to Blender maybe. That would be a pipe dream. Not a pipe dream. That'd be a big dream of mine.
That'd be really cool.
And then last would be having end-to-end testing support. So I love having Playwright. But then if there was also kind of some use cases that we were chatting about, like putting in some gobbledygook just so we can run up some memory. It doesn't really matter what the image is generating, but then test it on different devices and different platforms just from while you're hacking on your code. And we will be at sprints. Yeah. I don't know what our time looks like, but thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I'm sure we have time for questions because I think we zoomed through that. Any questions from the audience?
Yeah.
So when I was much younger in high school, I made Flash games that I got into programming. And obviously Flash is good, and my dream of being a game designer died with that. I'm fascinated with this topic. I've always loved this stuff as a front-end developer. First and foremost, getting H1 CSS and just feeling like you can take a little bit further, if you just do a little more, would be huge. But my impression of this is that it's pretty hard to learn. What is your take on it? Is it something, all the 3D stuff self-teach these days, or are there courses that you can take, or is it like you gotta go to school?
So I definitely don't think you have to go to school for it. It is partially self-teaching, self-taught things, and a mixture of doing like online courses. There are tons of free online courses that take you through the basics of not just 3D design, but also development. Particularly there are ones in A-frame as well as like 3D.js. I currently use, because I use more Vue, I use an abstraction of 3D.js called Thrace, which is a lot easier to learn because 3D.js, similar to WebGL, it gets a little more complicated and you have to program out every single aspect of your object. Whereas in Thrace, you kind of have pre-made components that make it a little bit easier to do. But just where to start, your game dreams did not die with Flash, trust me. It did not. And particularly because you deal in front end, I'd say take a look at Play Canvas and their API. They do a lot with like 3D games and XR, and I think that's a good place to start. Besides A-Frame, taking a look at the A-Frame docs. I know someone built a clone of Beat Saber in A-Frame, which is really cool, and it's pretty easy to get the hang of.
And it's kind of an extension on that. That's more of like focusing on creating the 3D assets themselves.
Yeah.
Okay, and then integrating it into like platforms that you'd actually use. Are you using the same tools? That's where the Unity, right, comes in, right?
Yeah. So different set of tools. It can be the same. Like Play Canvas, you can kind of use it to create and program as well. Things like Bezel is a way to program and prototype. But if you're actually gonna be like in the weeds and creating games and things or an experience, I would suggest Unity or Godot as well as Unreal Engine. And because there are developers in this room, or mostly developers, I'm actually moving away from Unity and going into Unreal Engine. A lot of people say there is a really large learning curve, and I actually don't agree with that. If you know a bit of programming, if you have worked with like Blender or node-based programs, it should be relatively easy, especially if you have a programmatic mindset. So I definitely think those are the ways to go.
Cool. That's the second question. We can do the third. Yeah. And then we'll go first.
I was just interested in what made you choose. So I can definitely see some of the same problems, the ones you're solving with Django and Wagtail image field, and that, but obviously a 3D image is a very different kind of fish, from what I understand. So I'm just kind of interested in how you made that decision, rather than to just go, oh, well, some class file field and bring over the bits I need from the image, to go, I'm going to make this a type of image. How do you kind of make that call?
Yeah, so I don't know if I made the right choice. It was a choice that I made so far, and I haven't regretted it yet. So we'll start there. And ultimately, the file types can be rendered in 2D, and there are ways to kind of maneuver around it. And where I saw, so I have a slide that's kind of an appendix now, and I can probably show it. It's not done. Actually, can't do that. But it is all in my code on the decisions that I made. So one or two fields I am abstracting, pulling from file field form, and then the other I am doing image a little. But if I'm looking at the code and I'm accounting for gaps, which I did because it got through, because it rendered. There were not too many differences in what I would need to be able to push it forward. So it really was just kind of this like hard-headed approach of like, let's pick the easiest solution, the most done solution, and see where the errors happen. And I was actually talking with a friend earlier today that Django is unique in the fact that we get really good error responses in our console. So like when something went left, it would point me exactly to where I needed to fix or address the change and what broke. So that was my first attempt in the proof of concept. I may live to regret that though.
Yeah, I was curious to know, especially without seeing the demo project, like what if the advantage of using Wagtail is like being able to kind of collect these different 3D objects to be able to like preview them on the back end as well, or if there's like particular use cases that y'all had in mind for that. Like the thing I thought of is like, for like a museum or a library,
Yes.
That's like digitized their archive, it probably is a management problem on the back end, but also you can just be like a cool way to go like play around and stuff.
100%. So I think we're one step away from being able to have. So I'm not really savvy with the Wagtail admin because I know it has some React and then it compiles and does some things, and I don't know exactly all of the things that that's available. But I would like to have a list page similar to what the image preview page looks like in Wagtail, just at the top level, and then have them easily. So, for example, you just click into it and you can adjust the focal point. For example, I would like something very similar. You can adjust attributes that really just correlate to updating. HTML elements on the A-frame, right? So you just put it in the admin and the A-frame HTML updates from a white background to a black background, or what the API allows, like a snowy scene. I think there's one, and there's a forest. So you just type in forest, and you're now automatically harnessing the power of A-frame on the front end, which is declarative. Did I answer your question? And no, we haven't gotten to that point yet. I think was maybe your question.
We'll just, yeah, there's other use cases that like kind of inspired, like, oh, so we both made this.
Oh yeah, there's a use case that had to do more with mobile delivery or mobile viewing for certain products, and that was one that we're like, it's an idea that I'm rummaging around in my head, and this would be a good way to actually do that, because it's a little hard to depending on how you use it, it's a little hard to do that with A-frame by itself.
Yeah.
And
you need the CMS part behind it to be able to kind of make it work. Yeah. So like white labeling a 3D CMS would be really cool. Yeah. Especially for our specific use case, which we probably won't chat about. But yeah, totally. There was a hand over on this side. Hi, friend.
The format you get up to
yeah.
Interesting.
I asked that because when here is created JSON, can be having some introspection and extract real parts of the scene. Then I can imagine we can construct a complex scene with parts from other parts. No?
Yeah. So to repeat the question, because haven't been doing that for the previous questions, apologies. But why choose or why not use a JSON field instead of an image field for GLTF? Because there's additional information, and it is under the hood a JSON format file field. That makes sense. I think I'm new to the file format, and I think that's something worth exploring. One of the things that I do like, though, about Wagtail in particular is that they do lean into very thoughtful opinions. So we're giving you the best path forward. But if you do want to make your own workaround, we give you kind of a preview version that might be, merged into main later, or actually, documented more thoroughly later. And I can totally see a world where we allow easily the JSON file format. But I wanted the same path forward for GLB, GLTF to start, and then also to support objects, which I think it might be easier, and then some of the more advanced file types. And I want it to be it's named GLTF Plus because I want to be able to use the same image file format for all images, and to just use a switch case, for example, probably not literally, but a switch case for what file type you end up doing, and then going down that right. So I want one tool to be able to handle it all. And that's why I went down with image.
Any more questions? Sweet.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you for the time.